For this fun exercise, we're going to do some jellyfish, and these ones are a very wet on wet technique, and I just love how this part here is so watery. I mixed up some yellow, orange, quin rose, a bit of cobalt, and a bit of imperial purple. And I'm just going to wet down where I'm going to put the jellyfish cap, or whatever it's called, his head. Okay, I'm going to wet that down, and while I'm at it, I'm probably going to wet this down because I want to make sure that there's some good flow down to this part. And I'm going to take a medium-sized brush, like a 12 or 14 or something like that, and I'm going to start with my yellow, dab out with a Kleenex a spot. It is dry in one spot, and then I'm going to apply my yellow. Okay, like so. Okay, a bit more paint. I want it to be nice and wet in this area, so I'm making sure I have lots of paint and lots of water on my brush when I do this. And then I'm going to have a bit of quin rose, a bit towards the bottom of this. Okay. And then I want to put some orange in there as well. Okay. Let that blend in with the quin rose. Okay. Maybe add a bit more orange in with the quin rose. That would help. Okay. And just have a few spots and things here and there. And lots of water. And so, as you can see, some of it's dripping down already. I can slant my board a little bit more if I want. I think I'd like a little bit of purple or something over on this side. I want this side to be a little bit darker. Okay. A bit muddy looking there, but that's okay. And then this part here, again, I'm going to encourage it with some water. I'm going to put this a little bit further down. I think I need more water up here in order for this to start flowing the way I'd like it to flow. I'm going to put this down here so we don't go off the board. And then I'm going to drop some pink in here. I'm going to drop a lot of water. Just going to let that water do its thing and encourage a few drips like this. Okay. And I want a fair amount of yellow in there too, though. I don't want all of this to go in the same spot, so I'm putting some of this yellow just on one side, and that way it can keep that yellow going. Oops, I got a hair there, I think. No, it's just a pencil mark. And actually I should have more yellow on this side too. Okay, and then when I get down here, I can probably just dab off that a little bit. So we want a bit more pink in the top. Quin rose. Let some of these flow up as well. Okay. And let that go down just towards the middle part. And then I'm going to move this up a tiny bit so that it doesn't drip as much as that. But I do want some real watercolor flow in here. So I'm just going to add more water in a few areas. And then let that flow. Maybe some orange in a few areas. Bit of orange. So some gamboge. And I'm just dropping these into a very watery mixture. I add, oops, I'm going to add a little bit of purple up at the top here. Imperial purple. And then let that drip down. If the purple goes into the yellow, it starts to make kind of a muddy color because they're opposites on the color wheel. I think we're okay there. Dry, that should be a watery mixture. Don't worry about trying to get that darker. Maybe we could have a little more shape to some of this. Something like that. Dab this up a bit. Okay. And now we're going to suck this droplet up here. Think of your brush and the paper as sponges. So at that point, my brush was drier, so it sponged up what was there. It's a good way of thinking about watercolor. And now I'm going to go in and put in the dark underneath here. Thicker mixture. If my paper's too wet, it's just going to keep running, but I want a little bit of running. Mix the purple with cobalt. And I'm making sure that it's a very dry mixture. I'm not using a lot of water here. And then I'm going to add some Quin Rose. Okay, tiny bit more Quin Rose. Back to my cobalt. And that's a nice dark purple. Add that underneath just to create this pattern that you see. And it's still pretty wet. Go back in and just make sure I've got, that was too much water there. Make sure I've got a nice thick mixture. Okay, and this is going to go around this area. It's very wet over here, so I'm not going to bother with that area yet. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so it's still a little bit too wet to do this part. It's okay if it runs down here. So I'm keeping my paper tilted, but I've got a little bit too much water there. So we might have to wait till that dries a bit. The other thing I want to do is I want to scrape out some patterns. And I've got I want to scrape out some patterns in this almost dry paint. So the patterns I want to scrape out are actually these tentacles that are coming down. Now it's just flowing back in, so it's too wet at this point, but I don't mind This will create some dark tentacles. I don't mind that. I think that's going to be okay. And then I'm going to continue on with that with a smaller brush. And here I need a nice thick mixture. Well, not too thick, maybe more like coffee mixture. Okay, and then I can start here. And notice how I'm holding the brush really high up. And I'm cool with there being gaps in these. They don't have to be completely in line. Do another one over here. Okay, I do like that when they go like that at the beginning. I think that's important. And then you don't want them to, if you do one here, you can't have one exactly that distance apart. You have to break it up in between. Okay. This one. So the brush is straight up and down. And then let's do another color. Let's maybe do that yellow. Okay. And some of these are really long. And actually, while I've got the yellow, I can do some coming down here. Now see how all three of these on this side are equally spaced? I have to mess that up a little bit. Okay. And then I'm going to do some in, well, I think maybe a bit of purple. Let's do a tiny bit of purple. We'll do that here. Still lots of water on there. Okay. All right. And we'll do some more. Well, we did our pinks. I guess we could do orange. Okay, that's it. Okay, and then I want to take some water, go like this, and I'm going to create a track for the pink to go down. So I went like this. What I want to do is have it follow down that track. Like so. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow. Make a track. And then put my yellow in. To that track. Okay, and maybe some more yellow over here. Now this time I'm not going to go as far down. I'm just going to put it in at the top. Okay. All right. So that's basically what you're doing for this one. Now we could soften some of these edges here because I find these ones are nice and soft. Maybe we could have had wet on wet down there too. Never thought of that. I did the video again using wet on wet on the bottom. I'm going to start just by wetting the paper. I got a slight tint to my water so you can actually see where I'm putting the water. I'm going to wet my paper all the way down. I'm actually going to wet it a bit over here because I want some of the effects to be very soft. So I'm just doing that as well. My yellow, but before I do my yellow, I'm just going to mark a spot that's a bit lighter so that when I do that, I can actually bend my head down and see, okay, where is the sun hitting this? And that spot is a bit lighter. And then I'm going to go in with the darker version of yellow all around. I'm going to put some orange in there too. Make sure the bottom has a darker tint to it. Some pink. Maybe some more pure pink here. The top of it is quite basic. A little bit more strength to the yellow here. Okay, I'm not worried if I'm going out of the lines here at all. A little bit more strength at the bottom. So I like the left white. I'm trying to do that. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And then maybe in the middle, I'm going to add a bit more purple. But again, I'm going to make that a thicker mixture so that it doesn't just spread all over the place. I can cover up some of my pencil lines with that. Holding the brush very loosely at the top. Okay, that's working okay. Dab this out. Yeah, I think that's all right. And then I'll try to do that with the yellow as well. So it's a bit more fat up here. Going in with the yellow. And again, I'm leaving those gaps so that it looks a bit more airy. And let's dab that up a little bit. Okay, and add our wispy strands. And what I would suggest you do for that is these are going to kind of come off like this, and they're straighter than the other part. So I'm just going to run them like that. And if you drag your hand along your board, you can make these kind of wispy. So by dragging my hand, I mean I'm just putting it flat on the board and curving them down. I'm mainly using pink here. Okay, so they start off kind of going out. Okay. You can have them overlap if you like. Okay, more pink. This one's going to go out to there. And then we'll have some yellow ones. Some of them might appear that they're coming from behind too. So if it was coming from back there, it would only show up down there. Okay. This way with this one. Okay, and then we'll do some Quinn Rose ones. Holding the brush there. And now it's dried a little bit up the top, and I can fix the area. I need a nice brush for this, so I can fix this area and try to mimic the shape that we have here. And I'm just going to try to make this kind of shape. So it goes up, down. I want to get my hand where it's wet. And more purple. Okay. And then I want that to move down a little bit. So I'm going to combine it with some more Quinn Rose. Okay. It's a bit wet here, so I have to be careful. All right. And then in this part, you can have some of this coming down. And then just take some clean water. And if you want, you can have certain spots be kind of dark. I'll take some clean water. It's good to show these things going off in that direction. And then, wherever you deem necessary, you can just extend that down a bit. This almost looks like it was done on Yupo, which we could try for this exercise if we want. But yeah, it's still very, very wet there. But that's our jellyfish.